like these is it goes beyond the academics. We know we want our kids to continue to be successful academically. We also know that we want our kids to be creative problem solvers, and we want them to have great social, emotional well-being, hope, engagement, whatever you want to describe it. And we have clearly laid out for the expectations for our students and the expectations for our staff. And now every school community is organizing themselves, and every office is organizing itself to be aligned with competencies laid out there. And it rests on the idea that we have some fabulous people in our schools who have done some really, really great work for a long time, and are those who are closest to the kids, closest to the families, closest to the issues, should be the ones who are empowered to make some decisions. We're already seeing some incredible examples of teacher leadership, family engagement, and different work happening as a result. And I think it's going to bode really well for an extension of the excellence and the equity that exists so deeply in Montgomery County, but also helps us achieve a very, very different standard. And it is truly about each and every single child. That is clear in here, and will continue to be. We have invested over the last year, I think you probably know, but it bears repeating, that we added about 95 positions, about $14 million to the special education budget this year, with no increase in population, but an increase in services. We are trying out a couple different programs, piloting a couple things right here. A couple schools are using iPads in some really neat ways, and we're just seeing how does it work, and we're seeing great results. We're going to try to, budget only going to try to expand that. Some other things that we're seeing that may have some promising solutions going forward. But we also know, and I'll stop on this and turn it over, that the only way that we can ensure that we are meeting the needs of our kids is by working very closely with our families. We know that our families are our kids' first teachers. We know how families of parents and families of students with special needs have spent an inordinate amount of time, an incredible amount of time, an incredible amount of energy discovering who your child is in a different way than perhaps the parent of a typical child has to do, because of the obstacles oftentimes that exist and the gifts that are present as well. And that work that you put in needs to be brought into how we do business, right? The work that you all do to help your children, our children, has to be part of the conversation of then figuring out what's the right academic, what's the IEP, and what's the future. And because of the amount of time and energy that our families invest, we need to sort of leverage that. Oftentimes, as we know, that comes out in the legal requirements and the sort of work that we have to do together to fulfill all legal requirements sometimes detracts, as we talked about before, from the power of that conversation. But my hope is that we can always be deeply engaged with each other as people, as families, as parents, as educators, to make sure that we are doing the best for our kids. Our numbers bear out that our kids of all backgrounds, right? So whether it is African American, whether it's Latino, whether it's children with special needs, we do well. Now, we also know we have ways to go. And just because we can talk about doing well overall for 17,000 or so kids we have with special needs, doesn't mean that there isn't one child out there, two children out there, whatever it may be, that we need to be more for and figure out what that looks like. Averages don't tell every story. We're working hard at it. Chris and Gwen and their team do remarkable work. This is why the state comes to look at us all the time. This is why people come around the country, move to Montgomery County. This is why other districts come and say, how are you guys doing work? And they're never satisfied. And they're always looking to get better, and we need your help to do that, which is why I welcome these opportunities. More importantly, I know that the folks who are making the decisions on a day-to-day basis welcome them so that we can really figure out how to do better at our work. At that, let me stop. About 5 minutes or so. Let me stop, and you guys have the microphone, so you give them to whomever, and please tell me your name and what grade your child is at. And again, if there's something very, very specific about your child, what's going on with the teacher, bus route, something like that, not only would it not be appropriate, like you understand, but I don't want to sort of go back and forth about a situation like we have at one individual school, one individual classroom. So we will certainly help the problem solve. So that, who wants to go first?
Yeah, who wants to go first?
If you have questions, just please raise your hand and we'll acknowledge you.
Okay, the one in the stripes.
Hi, my name's Sherry Dexter. I've got a son who goes to Longview in 7th grade. Recently learned that the therapy hours have been converted from weekly minutes to monthly minutes. And this is new to me, so I was wondering if this was a policy change because it's currently affecting him that it looks as though what the suggestion is to go from the time that he's always had to now about a quarter or a third of the time for various therapies, including physical therapy, OT, and speech, which is a big change. So I'm just wondering if that was something specific to me or if there was a policy change or other things going on because
that's the first I've heard of it. If you talk to the Longview, right there, if you talk to the Longview team about that to see if there's been some change?
We're just starting conversations, but it's brand new to me, so I've not had the chance to address this with Michelle yet.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't know of any policy change that would have regarding that, so maybe please sit down with staff and say, find out what's going on, what the change may be. It could just simply be a calculation issue, I don't really know. Take a look.
Okay, the lady next to her, the lady, did you want to?
My son is a 6th grade student at Longview School. My question is about the bus times and how Longview, as Stephen Knowles, are lumped in with the elementary schools, and extending their day by half an hour every day could be detrimental to their health. And are you giving these two schools any special consideration and bringing them out of the elementary school lump for adult time?
So, I really appreciate that. That has not yet come up it has not come up in any of my public forums. It may have come up in some of the smaller, in some of the smaller meetings. We have a forum coming up. You can also go on the website and give feedback on the Belltown proposal, because it's really important to understand things like that. So let me just help people understand what we're doing with Belltimes. I put out a recommendation based on a really good study that was done that gave us some options. The recommendation is to make high schools 50, that's 50 minutes later, and to make, which would then necessitate middle schools being 10 minutes earlier. And I also put in a recommendation to make elementary schools extend by half an hour. They are not dependent upon each other. They are not dependent upon each other. But my feeling was, if you're going to change bell times, do it all at once, it's easier to do the whole kid can do it at once. We have the second shortest elementary school day in the state, and there's a lot we can do in terms of enrichment and support, professional development, etc. This is not a done deal. It is not a done deal. I'd like for us to be able to do it, but it's got to be practical. So what we're doing now is we are getting a lot of feedback from teachers, from families, from students, from the community. And we're doing that for the next 6 months. Probably got 5 months now. And then we'll see if it's practical and what all the different initiatives. This is where it's actually really important for you guys to give us some good feedback, so that all different parts of the community are represented, and because we don't want to make a decision that would negatively affect anybody, so we need to know about it. And if there's something that could be a problem, please let us know. Let me also say, it won't, if it happens, it won't be until 2015-16 to give a year to adjust. So if there's something particular, please make sure we know about it so we can add that into the mix and the feedback that we get. Great. Good, make sure you give that to Gwen and Chris, we'll put that into the mix so the team has it. I appreciate you bringing that, because we need to know all those different things. And again, there's, like anything in Montgomery County and elsewhere, there are multiple opinions on it. There's not just one, and we're trying to figure out what makes sense for most people.
My name is Stephanie Maurer. I have an 8th grader at Tilden in the autism program at the Asperger's program. I don't know if it's supposed to be called that anymore, but anyway. My question is, as we're preparing for high school, I'm wondering what kind of services the county's providing, transitioning services for these kids who are hopefully going on to college, but may have a lot of difficulty with the social, the aspects, the scheduling, et cetera, et cetera. Just wondering what kind of services will be provided in high school to hopefully make sure that these kids will be able to go on to college.
Yeah, I appreciate you thinking about it now, because I know what schools are as well. And from what everyone has told me, and when I say everyone, I mean parents, as well as staff, there's a pretty comprehensive transition from 5th to 6th and then from 8th to 9th grade. And it's just really important that you make those connections early on both sides, so that we can make sure we know who your child is, what they need. I think people are very, the loads are heavy, right? The ratios are not always what we want them to be. But getting involved early and helping them understand who your child is important. I think we do pretty well with transition from what I've heard. I know these guys are actively working with our staff to make sure that there's a good, there's just good seamless planning. But doing it early is really important. And we try to take it seriously.
Hi, to piggyback on the question, my name is Elizabeth Fisher, and moved to this county for your special ed program. We have a son with Diamond Asperger's program. It's awesome so far. My question is, with the new DSM-5, the new wording, getting rid of the word Asperger's and everything is now autism spectrum disorders, is that going to in any way affect the fact that there are existing autism programs, Asperger's programs in the elementary and secondary level?
No. Yeah, I mean, and I think if I may comment on that briefly, so one of the great shifts that we've made since I was a teacher 20 years ago was from the idea of programs and services, and there are absolutely times when you need separate and distinct programs. But it used to be that there were programs and you tried to then fit the child to meet that programmatic need, which is about the adults. So the shift was made 10, 12 years ago maybe, where it's much more about services. Where does that child need? Sometimes, of course, you're able to get efficiencies of scale by consolidating services, and which is obviously appropriate, which then becomes a quote-unquote program. But whatever the label may be, it's all about the services, and we are not changing any of those just because the DSM-5 changes. It's sort of how I feel about federal and state regs. And this precedent, maybe I shouldn't say it, but I always feel like if we do what's right for kids, we're going to be able to meet the requirements of the feds and the state. And we do the same with the DSM, of course, that's really
Yes, anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Marilyn DeCoster, and I have a son, he's in the 4th year, I guess 3rd grade of the autism program at Hall Elementary School. And I'm just curious about, with the shift to curriculum 2.0, the core curriculum, how is that going to be integrated with what used to be, I guess, the functional life skills, FLS type, how will they be brought together?
Yeah, so we're trying different ways of doing it now, and I think it's a really important conversation at the school about that. And we're trying different ways, right? So one way is, again, we're piloting some assistive technology, particularly iPads, in a couple schools, and I've heard some great results to see, some kids may be able to express themselves using an iPad in ways they couldn't verbally, for a certain kind of child. And we know that technology can definitely play a role. We also know that our teachers are more and more attuned to and aware of and familiar with special needs than they ever used to be, and we're trying to create more planning time for the general teacher and the special needs teacher to be able to partner together, because in many ways, and there's some classes that, and every school, not every school is in the same place, because they have different, you know, just different structures and whatever else. But in many of our schools, you'll find that a special needs teacher, or it might be the English language learner teacher, or somebody with a certain specialty, is on that team when the grade level teams meet to discuss the units that the special needs teacher is there, planning along with them. So every school, and what we're doing now is we're working with every school to help them with those structures for planning purposes and to make sure our teachers have what they need. And we're just trying to increase planning time for the general ed and special ed teachers as well. Do you want to add to that?
Yes, I was going to say.
She's going to tell me what I said wrong.
No, I was going to say what he said was really right.
I was saying that what Dr. Starr said is absolutely correct, but we are really getting ready to embark upon that. We're going to even have opportunities where the autism teachers are going to be working with key staff in my department on understanding curriculum 2.0, how to make that adjustment. And there's also a leading expert nationally named Dr. Diane Browder out of the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. We are consulting with her because she's leading that reform effort and has designed some curricular resources that we have now purchased for our elementary schools to help them to understand that shift. So I think that we want to continue to be on the cutting edge and making sure that our teachers who support students with more significant disabilities understand the correlation between the expectations now of the rigor of Common Core.
And you know, another thing I'll add to that, which I hope is starting to permeate throughout the district, but it will probably take a while. And one of the reasons why I like having 3 competencies in here and also a holistic way of looking at schools is the idea that we've got to take a strengths-based approach to our kids and to our schools, to our staff. And instead of just saying, well, what is going wrong, right? How many kids didn't pass the test, whatever else. We're really encouraging folks to take a look at what our kids can do and what they're able to do. And when you look at this, what you're seeing is that the academics are important, but there are also other kinds of behaviors that are important. And I'm actually seeing teachers do some pretty remarkable things with assessing kids' group work, right, teamwork and things like that. And you know, and whatever it may be. So we're trying to take, and again, this is culture changing, and this doesn't happen overnight. The idea that kids have different strengths, and while they may not be able to do the same things academically or express themselves in the same way, or whatever else, they have certain strengths. And as more and more students with special needs to be included, the teacher is learning how to understand kids' strengths and then group and regroup and mix and match accordingly. Again, it doesn't happen overnight, but it's part of the work that we're trying to do, and I think it's more embedded in some of our new work than perhaps some of our previous work.
Yes, yeah.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Liz King. I had an 8th grader in your totally terrific Asperger's program at Tilden.
Let's just stop there. Totally agree. Asperger's program, totally.
Like the alliteration?
Yeah, I do.
Where I would point out the fact that it's a program really makes all the difference to the kids because they need a home base. There are absolutely tremendous, wonderful teachers and some very motivated paraeducators, but the program relies a lot on paraeducators who have not had training and do not have much interaction with parents. So I mean, when we see something that is falling apart, we can't talk to them. What could MCPS do in order to provide more backgrounds and training for people that are being used as critical staff in these programs?
And let me first clarify. So there are reasons to have programs. I don't want to suggest that we should not have programs. My point was that the sort of old way of doing business was you just had programs and you don't look at individuals, but there are absolutely appropriate times to have programs. Let me stop there. I don't want people to think that I'm against programs. So you got to find the balance. So we work very hard to train our paraeducators, and we know it's not enough. Part of it is a time issue, and just being able to keep them and pay them and make sure they get the training they need. We have put more money in the budget this year for training. There will be more money in the budget next year to increase training. was having this exact conversation just the other day about how do we make sure we increase that training. We also know we get a lot of turnover. They come in different times of the year, and it's hard. It's harder than when you have. It can just be a little tougher sometimes with the workforce there. But we're working very hard with SEIU, South America in particular. I attended their kickoff training in October, I think it was, to talk to them. We know this is critical, and we're putting more money in the budget to carve out the time to do the training.
Can I ask just my one question? Is there mandatory training yet for paraeducators?
I don't know. Do we have mandatory
We
training?
don't have mandatory training, but what we do in special ed, and as Dr. Starr said, we partner with Sally Merritt, who is kind of a personal liaison, human resource that works with paraeducators, and she helps us.
In the professional development, so for example, on November 1st, we just trained about 600 to 700 paraeducators. We focused on strategies for students with Asperger's and autism, just the full array. So we do that twice a year because that's a day in which teachers, I believe, are submitting their report card grades. And so we use that day to train our paras, and they love it. They are just there in abundance. Many of my staff members are here in the audience, and they know how those paras come out. And then we'll train them again. We'll have another opportunity in January. So those are two big sessions, but we've never done required professional development for the paraeducators.
Right. And
Chris was reminding me that there's crisis training that we do for paras in specific programs. Not all, but there's some in which we require because of the nature of the students that they serve. But to get across like the total gamut, we would love to be able to provide more opportunities in November and January 2nd.
Okay, yes, you back there, sir.
Hi, my name is Steve Zepnik, and I've been advocating for my 10-year-old grandson. I'd like to ask you if you feel that the dispute systems in the educational process there's a lot to be looked at, and that perhaps you need to meet with the parents that are undergoing such a hard process and to look at fairly what's going on and maybe decide what changes are necessary?
yeah, so I am one who would like to avoid all disputes. But you also have to be prepared when there is one. And 0.65% of our special education cases, students, result in some type of request for dispute resolution, whether that be mediation, hearing. So something very right is going on in the way things are handled. Something very, very right. Having been in other systems where that is not the case, I can certainly compare. And we also know that there are some families that, for whatever reason, were not able to come to a point, come to an agreement. And that's really tough. It's really tough. It's something that we want to avoid. But we also know sometimes people just disagree. So I'm comfortable with where we are right now. I am, because the numbers are really, really solid. And I will also say, so one thing that we're doing, I've been a little behind on it. It's just been tough, but we are hiring a general counsel position. I hope to have someone in place very soon. And one responsibility that this position has is to oversee all of our legal areas to understand how we're doing. Are there ways we can improve? Right? Are there things that perhaps we're not looking at? So you can look at the numbers, you can say our numbers when it comes to dispute resolution are fabulous, but is there something we could be doing differently? We should be talking, how do we understand all of our legal operations differently, with special education law being certainly a big area for us. So I'm comfortable with where we are, which doesn't mean which also means that I wish that we could get to yes with every single family that we have, but I also know that that's sometimes not possible. There's other things that we need to know about how to improve it. We're always happy to consider other perspectives.
Yes, you over here.
I have to follow up on that.
Sure.
I'm Dominique Pichard, and I have a first grade daughter at Bethesda Elementary. And I'm glad that we were happy with that 0.65%. I guess we were part of that 0.65%. Unfortunately, with the help of Ms. Richardson, we were able to come to Okay, sorry. I was just rambling. My question is with this new position of general counsel. I guess I come from the parent perspective and from the perspective of Montgomery County is not always looking out for the best of my child. They might be looking out for their pocket or for the system because it's more than just one child, and I understand that. Do you view that this position of general counsel, presumably hired by Montgomery County, will continue to protect Montgomery County? What do you think this position will do as far as these resolutions and how, when there are these disputes and sometimes the parents do come out winning the case, do you envision this will help come to better decisions earlier on?
So let me be clear about a couple things. One is the general counsel is not overseeing special education. The general counsel is going to be reporting to me and will be determining the effectiveness and quality of all of our legal undertakings, but it is not a special education specific position. But again, will be one of the expectations with all of our legal issues. They will certainly be giving direction on understanding where we can. So I find the word protect to be an interesting one. And I'm going to parse it just for a moment, or seize on it, because look, my job as superintendent of schools is to, and I am legally required to protect the legal and financial interests of the organization. Right? That's part of it's probably not only in my job description, but it may even be in Maryland state law. And I take that responsibility seriously. And I've been in situations, I will be very, very frank with you, having worked in other school districts and having been around this business for a while, I've been in other places where the policy towards special education was give away the store, right? Just give away the store and just wherever they want, for whatever reason. And again, I think that the challenge we always have is being able to rightfully recognize the success of the system based on the numbers we achieve, whether those are achievement numbers or whether those are financial numbers or legal numbers that say we're doing something well. So our graduation rate for special needs children far exceeds that of the state. We know we're doing better. Yet it's still not high enough. Right? We know our dispute resolution works really well in almost every case. But that doesn't mean that there's a parent who feels, you know what, you're not interested in my child, you're interested in, I'm going to use your words, protecting the system, not protecting my child, and I'm extracting that from what you said, it's not verbatim. And I wish that we were able to, again, every time say, it gets to a point where everybody agrees, and I think sometimes it is, I think what I've seen in my time is that over time, people tend to come together more than in the beginning. It's just what I've seen. Because oftentimes the educators know something that the families don't, and the families know something that the educators don't, and after a period of time, and if the relationship is good, and I think we work hard at having a good relationship, and we try new things and different things over time, we get to some agreements and experience that some people have maybe in the beginning is not what bears out later. Not guaranteed, right? I'm not saying that happens every time, it's perfect every time, but I do think that we tend to see that. So the most important thing is to figure out a way to have a really positive relationship between the educators who are trying to do a very, very hard job, parents who have a very, very hard job, and to find ways to come together. And as I said before, and I've said to you all many times, for the legal requirements of the IEP process go sometimes against the natural, I think, desire that people have to just come together and talk about a child. Because of all the legal requirements and all the, if you make one mistake, you're in trouble, right? And so there's a level of stress and anxiety amongst educators if we can't make a mistake. And then there's also, of course, a level of stress and anxiety amongst parents. Say, this is my child. They got one shot at it. And trying to figure out ways, and I think, we've done some training on that, but trying to figure out ways to come together as people, as educators, and as families, and community, to say what's the best thing, and then put it into the IEP in a way that meets everybody's needs and is agreed on, is what we want to get to. But I think there's a lot of other stuff that can sometimes get in the way.
I'm going to ask a question.
Sure.
But, have you, or do you have an educational consultant that could, that's on staff that could be kind of protecting the child? As, I'm seeing her points, I'm a parent. But could look at it differently, because you guys have certain things. You guys are running a business organization, but then we're thinking these are the kids. And sometimes an outside party can say, okay, here's what the parents really want. They might not be expressing it this way. Here's what I think is an expert that the kid needs. What can you all do to help us out?
Yeah, I'm assuming, yes, that we use outside expertise at different times. I'm trying to keep Chris when, but I can't imagine we don't use outside experts at different times when necessary. But I'll put you guys in respond to when we do that.
Certainly we do.
We often do that kind of dispute resolution, mediation process, administrative review process. We do often bring in outside people like Andy Eagle from the University of Maryland or someone who will call on to support our students, our families, and our staff. When we have requests, and often before requests. I think, as the parent said, that often there's a phone call or a conversation with one of our cluster supervisors or with Ms. Mason, that we really try to work with parents as proactively as we can. We just last spring finished the parent survey around the IEP process. You had a preschooler last year. You got a survey from us. In June, we did a survey of parents who had students with disabilities K through 12 and had an IEP meeting within the last 90 days, so basically from February through the end of May. We had a really a pretty good response to that survey. We're getting ready probably by February. We'll put out the results. So we really are very interested in hearing from parents about what is their experience, as Dr. Starr says, when they're sitting in that IEP meeting, and then taking those survey results and then literally developing an action plan. We just did that with our preschool staff and our families. So recently we had some parent training sessions to focus on pieces in the survey where parents said, I'm a little bit confused about accommodations for the preschoolers. Now, a little bit confused meant we still had about a positive response rate of 90 to 92%. But we took that very seriously. So we offered some parent training sessions on the IEP for our preschool parents, and now we're following up with our preschool staff. So I think out of that survey there were 3 things where parents said I needed more information. But really across the board, parents who responded to that survey felt like they were included in the IEP process, that they had an opportunity to share their concerns, to share information that they had, and that the services that were listed on the IEP were being delivered. But again, we want to take that information very seriously. A parent outreach committee that operates actually out of my office that includes special education and student services. We have parent representation on that committee, and we're looking at what other ways can we provide outreach. And I'll give a little plug. I see Denise in the back. I think it's May 10th, right, Denise?
Yes.
Denise Stoltz works in our Office of Community Engagement and Partnerships. Got that right. And
We every year receive funding from the Maryland State Department of Education to conduct parent outreach, and typically we've used that money to support SEAC meetings. But this spring, May 10th, it's a Saturday, we're going to be offering our first parent workshop, and we'll be coming to SEAC in January to ask for ideas for sessions. We're modeling it on very successful efforts over in Fairfax County and some other counties in Maryland that do this on an annual basis. So we'll be looking to you again for suggestions for sessions. We'll certainly be partnering with the organizations that I see represented in the audience, Down Syndrome Network, Extraordinary Minds, Learning Disabilities Association, to have information there and to present sessions. So hopefully that's helpful.
And I just want to mention that most schools, or at least many, should have a PTA special needs liaison if that person is comfortable doing so, and a parent feels that they need support, guidance, go to an IEP meeting. That is also a possibility. I've done that a couple of times in the schools I've been at. Sorry. And next question. Ida?
Hi, Dr. Starr. As you know, my name is Lina Astro. You hold yourself out nationwide as a social justice warrior or an equity warrior, but about 5 minutes ago you said that your interest is to protect the legal and financial interest of the organization. Regarding the Rock Terrace matter, it is abundantly clear that to date, all I have seen is MCPS acting to protect its legal and financial interests. It has been 6 months now. The only thing that is fair for the children and families is to hire an independent, outside, third-party forensic accountant or auditor to reconcile the accounts. And I don't want to hear anything about how you're working with the criminal justice system. That's a separate criminal matter. I'm talking about what's right and equitable and fair for the kids, and I want to know when you're going to take action on that matter.
So let me first say, I don't necessarily plan the mantles that others would give me, and I also, so what people in Montgomery County may say, outside of Montgomery County may say about my commitment to social justice, which I do have a deep commitment to it, is not necessarily what I say. Let me also state that when I said earlier, let's be clear about what I said earlier. We know it is on tape, right? So what I said is I am legally responsible for protecting the legal and financial interests of Montgomery County Public Schools. I don't think our taxpayers would have it any other way, right? We run a $2.3 billion organization. There are laws that bind us, and the CEO or the superintendent is responsible and accountable for making sure that we are following them appropriately. And sometimes, frankly, that responsibility interacts with my dad hat, right? Because I have 3 kids of my own, or my experience as a teacher, or just sort of how I think as a person. Usually, I'm not always able to reconcile them, but I will say that sometimes my legal responsibilities and my desire to do things, or what I wish I could do as a parent or as an educator, sometimes get compromised. So regarding Rock Terrace, so currently the Maryland State Attorney General Office is conducting an investigation. And we know that, so we're waiting a legal opinion. Let me be really, really clear. If this were just an easy fix, that had one right answer, whether it's a reimbursement or something else, I wouldn't have done it. Right? If this was something to say, here, here's something to do, you can easily do it, and fix it by reimbursing kids, doing whatever it is. I'm not saying that's it. Certainly I would do it, mainly because I don't like the idea that there are some parents who were not given correct information or not given any information by the school, and then have not been given a level of satisfaction, and in fact have decreased trust in us because they feel like It's just not clear, right? And it's such a complex situation. And if there were one thing that I could do, say, boom, we will pay back money, we will do whatever, I would, believe you me, I would do it. But we're awaiting the investigation. It's a complex and thorny legal issue. We have people on it. The state's attorney, State Attorney General's office is on it. We're awaiting that. And once I have a clear and definitive answer as to what I can do, then we will absolutely do it. And there are those out there who will use it as a symbol, will use it as a reason, use it as an opportunity to decry all that we do to serve our children, right? And it is just because something goes wrong, and something clearly went wrong, and people have been held accountable for what's gone wrong. But just because something goes wrong doesn't mean that all is rotten, right? So we are clearly on top of what has been going wrong. It is taking longer than any of us would like. We will get to a resolution, and it does not mean that everything we do for 17,000 plus kids is not right just because there was one bad incident that we are working very hard to clean up, and that when we clean up, we will do it right. That's the other thing. I don't like going down the road where, we take interim or short-term measures that don't get to a comprehensive fix. I'd rather, when we have the full understanding of, or the full legal work done, and then we understand what our options are, we will take action. But until that time, I would just appreciate if you allow the process to work its way through.
Yes, the meeting is
Hi, my name is Rhonda. I'm a parent of a child formerly from Rock Terrace. It's been over 4 months since we heard from MCPS or Mr. Bowers, who promised to keep us in the loop. My child had hundreds of dollars taken from him, and I haven't heard a word from you guys. The investigation is different than what MCPS could do, but not even communicating. What are you all doing other than the Attorney General's investigation? I want to know, in other words, aside from Mr. Newcomer, what is MCPS doing on behalf of my child?
So first let me apologize on behalf of the system, for the events that occurred. And yes, right, it is in no way, shape, or form is it a reflection on the system, nor is it something that, it's just bad all the way around, right? There's nothing good about it in any way, shape, or form. So I apologize on behalf of the system. Because you shouldn't have to go through that, right? You should not have to go through that. I'm not going to talk in depth about legal issues because I don't want to compromise anything. There are, there's a whole bunch of lawyers working on this to try to figure out what we can do. I know Mr. Bowers came to a meeting a few months ago, and I know July, whatever it was. I'd have to check with Mr. Lowndes, Dr. Garrett, about any recent communications that have gone on. They don't typically go through my office. One thing I have absolutely said as a clear expectation that we do communicate with folks about what's going on. I do know what sometimes happens is that when there's no new information, we tend not to communicate it, which it's not an excuse. Please understand, it's not an excuse. But I do know how sometimes people are on the same way. If you don't have anything new to tell anybody, then it doesn't get communicated. So it might simply be that because it hasn't been, because it just continues to be this legal web that we're untangling. There's nothing we're definitive that we're able to share. It may be, and I'd have to check on all the communication flow that folks haven't gotten up. But we'll check on what communication has gone on to people. And remember, there's also multiple layers here, right? Because there are current, there are former students, there's just a whole bunch of different layers, and trying to stay on top of it is not as straightforward as we should.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions? Yes.
I've got about 9 minutes left.
My name's Mary Ann, and I have a 12th grader. I have grave
concerns when you talk about social emotional learning, because unless there are specific criteria and milestones for kids that need SEL help, it's really useless to talk about it. From down in the trenches, it's just not happening. And I have people at my son's school who say he's fine. A people personnel worker who's never met me or my son say he's fine, and that just makes my head want to explode. You talked about it in every meeting I've been to, but what really are the guidelines for kids that need that help? And what's measurable and enforceable?
So, again, I can't comment on the particulars that are going on with your son, of course. But
In general, it's fine.
In our framework, we have laid out clear expectations for what social emotional learning or social emotional well-being looks like for kids and what the behaviors are of staff. And let me be clear on a couple things. And then we measure it with surveys of student engagement and well-being and sense of hope. And these are not down to the individual child for a very important reason. Very important reason. We want to get an overall sense of the school culture, an overall sense of the student body, an overall sense of the parent and the faculty levels of engagement. We don't want to say, you know, you're doing well social emotionally, you're not, you're doing well, you're not, et cetera, et cetera. We would not want to do that for a number of reasons I can go into at another time. But the idea behind social emotional well-being is that it is for every single child, and it is for every single adult. Every single adult is responsible for attending to and being sensitive to and being aware of the social emotional needs of our children. And it is good for every single child. Right? And there's no, and we're trying to get, excuse me, an overall picture, recognizing then that there's some kids you gotta really drill down, right? You really have to understand, okay, what's really going on with this child because they've been acting out a lot. Or what's really going on, they seem very withdrawn. What's really going on, they're not able to work well, whatever it may be, you're just having a tougher time. That would be a very specific conversation if your child has special needs. That would happen during the IEP process, right? We look at those types of things and say, what do we need to do to help this child socially? So what we're doing is, again, we're doing training on it. We have milestones around it. We have clear descriptors of what the actions are, but we're not doing a character report card or anything like that. We're trying to get a sense of the overall school, right? Because every school has its own context, every school has its own story, every school has its own culture that needs to be focused on the needs of academic, creative, problem solving, social, emotional needs of every single child. So if it gets deeper than what we just want to do for all children, then it's a conversation you have to have with your school about what those things are and how it can be addressed.
Okay, you over there in the back.
Clearly that sparked a bunch of things with your hands went up.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Katie. My 8-year-old son has autism, and he's having a fantastic year at Jones Lane Elementary School.
All right.
His autism doesn't allow him to share his day. Like if I say, how was your day? What did you do today? Pretty much nothing. Little bits, possibly. But I wanted to ask you, this is not an isolated case. Most of my friends who have children with autism have the same problem, where we can't talk about the day. And the home-school communication is a challenge. I'm just curious, I've talked to the teachers, the administrators, everyone's on board with looking at different modalities, different new ideas. But I just wanted to hear from you as a dad of somebody, what would you think is reasonable to have about your child's day? And how would you help us think through how we can get this moving for more communication between home and school?
Well, so let me first say, I really appreciate that you guys are talking about it at the school level, and I know you're Jones Lane working with Kennedy Krieger Institute too, right? And I think that's exactly how we want to see the change happen in Montgomery County. School communities taking on these ideas in ways that work for them, because the power of the school community is what's going to move it forward. You have so much, there's just so many opportunities to learn and grow together with us, of course. So I don't really actually think I have any good answers for how my children engage in that conversation. because they don't. I was getting fine, way to do school. So I'll tell you what I do, and I'm not very good at this, I don't think, because I'm as distracted as any other point out there. And I will in no way, shape, or form comparing, what we have to do as parents. I try to ask very specific questions. So with my kindergartner, now, so what do you read? Or, what do you do in mathematics or something like that? Very specific, and I learned that from some teacher last year or 2 years ago that I was talking to in the hallway of one of our schools, and she was looking at your kids something very specific. And I do know, and this is one of the things we're finding, for example, with our kids who are using the iPads, who really, are not communicative. They're finding ways to express themselves by pointing at things, right? And by using technology in a way they might not be able to express themselves. So I don't know what else you have available, but I find the way to engage with my kids, when I just ask them generally, and I don't know when I ask them generally, I get just about nothing other than good or fine or whatever it is. When I ask them very specifically about what did you read, who did you play with at recess, what did you guys do in mathematics, that's when I get a more complete answer, and I imagine there's a range of sort of desire that kids to share that some clearly more comfortable than others with that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I feel. Not a great parenting technique to spend a lot of time.
Talk to me after.
Can I ask a follow-up?
I've got like 2 minutes. And
Can I ask a quick follow-up question? Are you
Sorry. Hi, my name is Elizabeth. I'm the president of GTLD Network, and I also work with the ACT program in MCPS. I have a daughter at the French Immersion program at Maryville. My question is about the identification of GTLD students. They're a particularly difficult group to identify a lot of times because maybe their grades aren't suffering as much as others, or they might already be misdiagnosed as having emotional disturbance or some other issues. So my question is both on how we can improve identification as far as awareness, I guess, with the staff in the schools to know what to look for and to test and be willing to test. And also for students to provide them access to all different kinds of programs. Like my daughter's in a French immersion, but we have to sometimes work on certain aspects of that. So just to provide them with the opportunity to take part in different programs. There are 7 life-changing, from what I understand, GTLD programs within the county, but not all of them fit that mold. And they're wonderful, amazing programs, but
So I will tell you frankly, I don't know all the ins and outs of the identification process. Chris and Gwen can help you with that. Let me say 2 quick things on it. One is we did add 5 psychologist positions this year in order to help with testing and assessment purposes. We know we can cut. We've also growing, our enrollment is growing, we haven't cut pace. So part of the reason was to be able to expand our services in that area. And this is just a very general answer, and Chris and Wayne can say much more specifically. But this is exactly why my message to our educators has been, and this goes back to the social emotional piece. Know your children, right? Know who our kids are. And you have to, everybody's got a story, everyone's got a context. And your job as an educator is to know who your children are in front of you. And one of the things actually, at the elementary level in particular, that's sort of talking about curriculum 2.0 is the multiple ways kids can interact and show what they're able to do. And and while the rigor of it is very challenging, there are many different ways that kids can actually engage in the learning space. And we're really pushing, and again, this is what social emotional well-being is all about. Know each one of your kids so that you can then see, we're hoping that people can pick up on some of the issues you described a little more quickly. And we've added technologies to help with it on a more formal technical basis. I got to go to the Latin dance competition next afternoon. I said I would be there for the second half. I know it's never enough time. Thank you all, I appreciate it. Please keep working with Glenn. And you want to know what's going on. I appreciate you guys coming out tonight. Please have a nice Thanksgiving. Everybody enjoy yourselves, relax, and I hope to see you soon. Take care.